So hello there and welcome to today's class. This is our Buddha class. So it's designed for adult beginners and people who want to try pastels and haven't before. So this is a very popular little subject that we like to do in our beginners class because it's all about texture today, and it's going to be about not blending the pastels into the paper so much, but more about letting the pastels sit on the surface and create that wonderful texture that you can see in the image there. But first we're going to begin with a charcoal sketch. And so the first part of the class is just a few minutes, maybe 10 or 15 minutes, just spent drawing up the image onto some drawing paper. So I've got an art diary here, and it's just a little cheapy one that I just do all my charcoal sketches in. The reason we do the charcoal sketches is because it's just a good way to practice the image, rehearse it, and get familiar with it. So I like to just look at the black and white picture at this point. So I try to cover up with the coloured one. So then I've only got a black and white reference. And that also gives me a lot of information about tone and light and dark and shape. So usually I just draw up a thumbnail area on my drawing paper like this. And so that's going to be the area that I'm going to draw into. And then I'll do a grid mark. So on the images that I supply for you for the classes, you usually get grid marks on them. This one I've just done halfway across and halfway down. And that's just a little tool that we use to get the drawing right and to get everything where it needs to be within the picture. If you feel like you want more grid marks, then feel free to rule your own up onto the image, and you can actually break it down into, much smaller sections. So whatever works for you. This image is not terribly complicated, so I thought just a simple halfway mark across and down is probably going to be enough for today. So the first thing we want to do is look at the arc of the brow and the nose and the shape of that and where they sit within the picture, and where they sit in relation to your grid lines or in relation to each quarter or segment of your picture. So I can see that the nose line crosses the grid mark at about here. So we've got just about half a face, slightly more than half a face. So if you mark in on your grid line where that crosses there, so it's about that far in from the edge of your page, and then I'm just going to lightly draw it. So where does it cross on the other grid marks? About there. So then we need to just lightly draw that line in. I'm going to find a longer piece of charcoal because then I can hold it loosely. I like to hold my sticks of charcoal loose when I'm first sketching in. Two reasons. One is because it keeps me relaxed and I can hold it from a distance. Let me just see who. Sorry, someone's just dinged or something, and I can't see if anyone's arrived. Oh, there's Lynn. Okay, lovely. We'll let Lynn in. Now we're all here. That's good. Okay. Hi, Lynn. I've already begun recording, and we've just started with our charcoal sketch. So welcome to the class today. And we've drawn this up, and we're just doing it in black and white to begin with. So you'll have your Buddha image there, and we're just marking out the line of the brow and doing that within the grid mark in relation to the grid. So having a grid really helps us to figure out where things sit. So I was just talking about why I'm holding the charcoal stick quite loosely. So rather than holding it like this, as you would if you were drawing or writing, that keeps your grip very tight, and it means that you've got to be quite precise, and you don't have as much freedom of movement when you hold your pencil like that, because you've only got this much movement in your hand. Whereas if I hold my pencil or my charcoal at the end like this, I have a lot more freedom. I can actually move my hand or my arm and get a lot more movement in it, And it also means that I have a lighter mark. So if I'm just doing very light marks like this and they're wrong, they're easy to take off. And again, that's another way of keeping my mark nice and loose, because I can remove it if I need to, and it doesn't mark the page as much as it would if I was pressing harder and doing a more definite mark. So while I did that, I popped the eye mark in there. Sorry, jumping ahead a little bit. And what we're going to do is just lightly mark in all the pieces of this face. So it's fairly simple, really. It's a very simple kind of structure. And the things to notice, I guess, the most are where the light and the dark sit. So I've put this shape in across here for the eye, and you can see that there's a little bit of light on the rim of the eyelid on the very edge there. And then there's another bit of light on the bottom eyelid. And then under that is shadow. So if you lightly just draw in a bit of shadow under the eyelid and leave some of that, leave the strip of light unpainted or uncoloured, then the paper will become the light. And you can see I've probably put that a little bit too low, depending on your grid mark. So it sits just above the grid line. And so therein comes my theory about pressing lightly, because now I can erase the charcoal quite easily with my kneadable eraser. And because I didn't press very hard, it's coming off really easily. So I always tread lightly at first, go carefully. That's my theory anyway, when it comes to drawing up your art. And even when you first put your colour on, just go lightly, and then you've got space then to kind of press harder and be more defined in your mark, or take it out if it's not in the right spot. I've just softened that up. So you can see I've left some white along this line here. So that's the bottom eyelid, left some white. If you haven't left the white and you want to get it whiter, again, just grab your kneadable eraser and squeeze it so you get a nice, like a knife blade kind of edge on it, sharp edge. And you can literally run that along and like you're drawing with it, and it'll take out some of that white. So these erasers are great for charcoal and pastel, and yeah, great to have. So you always need to have one of those handy. I'm just putting the dark area in where the slit of the eye is, and just notice the shape of that as it comes in towards the nose. There's this little curl down a little bit where the tear duct would be. Kind of curls down like that. So we get this lovely sleepy sort of shape to the eye. It's quite beautiful. There's also a rim of light on the top of that eyelid. So again, if you just draw a light mark across there, and then we can shade in kind of the rest of the face and leave that white area unshaded. I'm not going to shade the whole thing just yet, but that's the idea. And so by leaving the area above the dark mark white or light, and if you didn't, then again, you can just use your eraser and take that out, and that will highlight that little bit there. So this is what we want to notice, is where all the lights and the darks are, and then there's shadow under the eye. So I'm just looking at the shadow there and shading that in. Charcoal's beautiful to work with. This would be actually really nice to do in just charcoal, but not today. Okay, so we've got the arc of the brow and the nose, we've got the eye, and we've left the light on the top and bottom eyelids. We're going to come back and put more tone and things in a minute. I just want to get the shape of the nose in here. So what I'm looking at now is the bottom of the nose, and where does that sit in relation to the height of this quarter of the page. So this section on the bottom left quarter, whereabouts within the quarter does the nose sit? And so if the halfway line's around there, I would say it sits just above the halfway mark, because it's not quite halfway down. And if you're not sure, grab yourself a ruler and just measure it. So I'm measuring that little quarter, which is 50 or 5 centimeters. Halfway would be 2.5. And so halfway is there, and the nose ends just above the halfway line, doesn't it? So it's around about there. So this is important because you want to make sure we leave space for the mouth and that everything is going to fit. So we've got a nose there, and it kind of comes down in a little bulbous end, and then it's got almost a separate piece on the right where the nostril sits, and that's got a little dark hole underneath there. So just marking all of that in, and just do it lightly, as again with your pencil. If you need to get it off, you can, or change the shape, you can. So that's basically the nose shape. I think my nostril's a bit big. Yeah, it is. Okay. And again, I can fix that or change it. Okay. And then the mouth. So the mouth sits within this bottom half. It's the halfway mark there. And of course, you can grid that up further and find that yourself. So the mouth sits down here. And we've got the top lip and the bottom lip. So treat those as two separate pieces, basically. So we've got a top lip, comes across like that. I'm just going to colour it in so I can find it. It isn't that dark, but that's okay. We can lighten it up after. And then the bottom lip comes down and across. So it's very wide. And then it's quite dark in between the two lips, isn't it? And then it kind of gradually comes out into a lighter colour or tone. So the bottom lip is quite almost not square, but it's very it's more square or not as soft as the top lip. And you've got to make sure that you get the dip of that lip in the centre of the nose, which is just off to the side of the page. So they need to line up. You've got to get those lined up properly so everything works. Now I've just smudged charcoal everywhere. Anyway, so that's pretty much where the main things in this image sit. And then we can look at the side of it too. So off to the side, we can see that the tip of the ear, and that's got a lovely little shine on it, which we can have some fun with later. And so where does that sit in relation to this quarter? And I would say the top of the ear sits about halfway down inside this quarter and about probably halfway across, just about halfway across. So about there, I would say. And it comes down on a little angle like that. And then we've got the other part of the ear. So it all gets dark back here. You can't kind of see what's happening in there because it's dark. And then we've got the rest of the ear, which kind of comes down the side of the face. And as it comes down, it tapers in towards the chin area. So again, we just want to make nice, loose, soft marks down the side there like that. And that will give us some shadow on this side of the face, and then a bit of light in where the ear is coming forward, coming towards us. It's lighter, and then we wander off into the dark background. Now we're going to work on dark paper today, so hopefully you've got some. If not, don't stress. You can always fill the background in with a dark colour. So if you've got a light or mid-tone coloured paper or something that's not dark, it's okay. You can actually colour the whole thing in with black afterwards and end up with a nice dark background anyway. So anything is possible. Don't stress if you haven't got the right gear. Okay, so now we've got those main parts in there, and all the bits are in the right place. So just double check that everything's sort of sitting where it needs to be. And the final thing we've got to pop in there is the little bindi that sits on the forehead there. So that's that there. Now, oh, put it too low. So I'm just looking at that in relation to the height of the brow. And so it's the middle of the bindi sits about level with the height of the brow. So it's got to come up a tiny bit. So all those things are relative, and it's really important to measure and make sure everything's in the right spot. So the bindi sits about there. So that's cool. And then the top of this, so you can see that he's got a bit of hair, kind of comes down through the top mark there and then off into where the top of the ear starts. But we can't see a great deal of that. So it's got this, stripy effect. And then it kind of disappears off into the background. In the coloured version, it doesn't. It's still quite obvious, and we'll do that in the golds and things. But on the black and white one, we really can't see a whole lot on that side because it's so dark. So next thing we're going to do before we finish up with this part of the class, I'm just going to shade in some of these areas because I was talking about leaving some areas light for the highlights and so forth. But to make things light on this paper, on a white paper, you need to kind of darken it first. So what I've got is a short stick of charcoal, and I've just dropped it on its side. It's literally lying down on my page. And I'm just going to kind of run that across. And you can see, I probably should have rubbed out my grid lines. And if you want to do that, you can. But you can see that just doing this is starting to give me a really nice texture. Because this paper is drawing paper, so it's got a little bit of texture in it. And I'm just rubbing the charcoal over the paper and it's picking up this beautiful textured effect, which is what we want today. So this is the look we're going for today, to get that nice feeling of texture so that you can look at this picture and feel like you can touch it and it's going to be all rough and kind of bumpy. So that's the impression we're going to try and create. So by just rubbing my little charcoal stick around, I can get some really nice effects happening. And once we've got enough of that on there, then we can start to just darken up under that brow. So notice where the shadow sits. So the light on this is coming from, where's it coming from? Left or right? Maybe in front or above, slightly above in front, possibly. Sometimes it's hard to tell. Just trying to figure it out by the shadow. I'd say it would have to be above because we've got this dark shadow here under the brow, and then it gets a little lighter down on the nose, and then down around the top above the nostril on the nose, darker in there. So these are the things to notice. It's just where the lights and the darks are. On the hairline, we've got it's dark in there, so just press a little bit harder with your charcoal. I'm just doing little squiggly marks to try and get that hairy sort of edge going on. And then it's also darker from that side, and then as it comes across to the front of the face, it gets lighter. So again, you can just press a bit harder with the charcoal, and that'll give you that darker mark. And I'm just in the ear now, so up in the ear. Remember I said we've got a really light tip on the ear, and it comes out in a little triangle shape. And then we've got the tip, and then inside the ear, which is dark, comes down from up there. So I know that looks a bit strange there, but that's the shape of it. And then it comes down into the side of the face. And as you come down the side of the face, round towards the chin, it gets darker down there too. So press a little harder there with your charcoal to darken that off. So see how by just varying the pressure, we're getting different tones. And so now that's starting to create the feeling of shadow and light. And again, I'm just going to have a look around the top of the mouth here. So I've got the little bit of skin at the top of the mouth, a little bit there. Just marking that in as well. So subtle little things that you can lighten and darken that will just bring something to life and turn it into an object. So the mouth needs a bit more work. Don't want to spend too much time on this section because I really want to get stuck into the colour because that's the fun bit. But this is important because we want to practice and rehearse. And doing this will really help with your artwork if you practice it. Just get familiar with what it is you're painting. I'm just darkening up under the lip there. You can see under the lip there's a lot of shadow. And then on the front of the lip, on the bottom lip front, we've got light, because that must be where the light's bouncing off. So again, you can use your eraser just to lighten that up a little bit and get the light bouncing off there. But you still want dark or shadow where the lips meet in the middle. And then I need to lighten up my top lip as well, because I made it too dark. And then dark as it goes in towards the bottom lip. So checking your black and white version will always give you a really good indication of your tones. And that's why I will give you both options, because then you can check where's it light and where is it dark without letting colour confuse us, because once you start converting tone into colour, it starts to get a little bit more tricky. And, you know, it takes some practice to kind of get familiar with where to put different colours to create different effects, etc. But it's all about the tone, and as soon as you can start to see tone in colour, that's when the magic begins, because you can really make some amazing art based on that. Okay, so I'm not going to spend much more time on this. I think that's probably long enough, and then we can get stuck into the colour version. So, as I said, if you wanted to darken your background off, you can do that just by pulling your charcoal across there. It always makes the light look more fun when you have a dark background like that. And so by doing that, you know, it brings the Buddha face forward, and we're focused on it now, so we don't have that big white stuff on the side. And again, you can use your eraser to take some of the charcoal off if you want to highlight a little bit. So the top of the ear is a real highlight. And then I haven't put a lot of charcoal on the rest of it, so there's not a lot to take off anywhere, but maybe around the lips, on the edges of the lips, you can see the top lips there have a very fine line of light, and the bottom lip has a little shine on it too. Maybe the nose as well. Took too much out. And this is the nice thing, you can just put it back. If you take it out, just pop it back in. Easy peasy. And then back to the eye where we started, so we can put a bit more shadow under that bottom lid again and still keep the white line there. So that's giving me the shine on the eye. So basically we've just drawn a portrait, I guess. Very simple one, but you know, it's a structure, isn't it, of a face, and it's understanding where everything sits in relation to all the other bits and pieces. So I think we might be ready to move on to the colour version. Has anyone got questions or comments or anything to say? If not, I shall carry on, but feel free to speak up. All you need to do is just unmute yourself and then...
Hi Jeannie, Lynn here.
Hello. Hi Lynn, you made it. Good to see you.
I made it. Oh yes, I've been in and out twice and got frozen screens and all sorts of things, but I'm here. So yes, and I can see with what you've done, it's very easy to do. And as you said, if you know where the lights and darks go, it just makes it so much easier. Doesn't it?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Everything comes together then. And if you look at things as just light and dark and shape, it's amazing what comes, without you even realising it. Lovely. Well, I'm glad you're here. That's good. Wonderful.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Okay, so let's get on to the colour version now. What I'm going to do is grab a piece of paper. So I did say in our notes that black or dark paper would be the best. As I said though, you can always fill the background in. So if you don't have dark paper, don't stress. I'm just going to grab a piece out of my drawer. And the other thing you're going to need is a little board. So best thing to do is tape it down onto your board. Oh, Let me get the morning Buddha off the board first. So this is this morning. I'll just show you quickly what we did in class this morning. So that was our morning guy, and a little bit more detail in him for the intermediate students. And they all loved it, and everyone's looks different. So cool. So that was fun.
That's fabulous.
Yeah, he's all right, isn't he? Yeah, could do with a bit more work, but yeah, it's okay for today. Thank you. All right, so I've got a board, which is what you want, because then you can tape your paper down to the board. You don't have to hold on to it all the time to keep it still. And that means you've got, you know, free hands if you need them. And it's not as distracting, kind of, you know, trying to hang on to something all the time. Because I'm working flat on a table, I'm just taping my corners down and I'm reusing the tape. So it's not terribly sticky anymore, but it's just enough to keep it in one spot. If you're on an easel or you're more upright, then you'll probably want to tape all around it, or top and bottom, just to keep it in place so it doesn't fall down. So I reuse my little bits of tape, and if you have fresh tape, just run it onto a tablecloth or your clothing before you pop it onto your paper. That way you're taking some of the adhesive off and it won't tear it later on. So I used to tape my papers all the way around when I was standing on an easel, or still do. And sometimes, you know, the tape would be on there for a couple of months if it was a big one and taking a long time. And I'd go to tear it off and it would tear into the painting. So that's heartbreaking when you've spent time making something beautiful. So always make sure you do that with your tape so that you don't rip your painting. And when you do rip it off, if you have it down the side here, for instance, you know, down through there, so I won't leave it on there so it won't tear. Say I was all the way around. When you do take it off, take it outside, so take it down and away from your painting rather than in towards it, because if you take it in towards your painting, it can still tear and rip the paper. So always pull it away from your painting, so that'll decrease the chances of it tearing. Okay, getting my table organized here. So I've got my colored Buddha. So I'm going to fit him here next to me on my page. I've also got him on an iPad in front of me. So I've got two versions of him to look at. The paper one's good because I can look at the grid on there and figure out where the drawing needs to be. And the digital one is good because I can zoom in and get nice and close if I want to see some detail. So yeah, I like to have a bit of everything. I know not everyone can, but it's handy if you can. Just got to rearrange everything now. Okay, so that's him there. And first thing we need to do is rule up our page. So because I'm on black paper, I'm going to rule up with a light coloured pencil. So this is a yellow, just so that you and I can both see it. And we're only going to do the halfway marks, unless you want to, you know, do more detail or break your picture down into finer grids. That's absolutely fine. There's nothing bad about that. You know, the more information you can give yourself to draw something, the better. I think I just did that crooked. 11.5. Just look crooked. Must be having delusions today. Okay. And then halfway across. So this paper is 30 by 23, so my halfway is 15. Great. Okay. I'm just going to double check that. It still looks crooked to me. No, it is slightly. Not much. Again, when you're drawing your grid mark on, always make sure you use a pastel pencil or a charcoal pencil. Don't ever try to use graphite or lead pencil, because it kind of stains underneath the pastel and you can't cover it. It's terrible stuff. And because this paper's gritty, it kind of holds on to everything. So just make sure you don't use graphite. And the other reason to press lightly is so that you can remove it. Because I'm going to leave my background unpainted on this side at least, we'll fill everything else in. But on this side, I don't want to be able to see that mark when I'm finished. So I just do it very lightly, and then I can get it off easily. The harder you press on this paper, the harder it is to take it off because it kind of eats it. Okay, so we've got to draw this up again. We've already done it once. So I know from what I've just done that the nose comes to about there. And I know that it crosses the grid line about there, comes down. And so again, I'm just using my pencil lightly. I'm holding it loosely and not pressing too hard, because that way I can take the mark off if I need to and keep it quite loose. And then I also know that the brow line crosses over about there. So then I can arc that around. That's a lovely arc, isn't it? It's quite round. So I want to go up and down into the nose. And again, I can just take that other mark off because I didn't press too hard. So don't stress if you have to do and undo things a few times. It's better to do that and try and get it right than just, you know, wing it. And then at the end of the day, it's not right, because the drawing's really important to get all your bits and bobs in the right spot. Okay. Then we've got the bindi. So I'm going to put that in. And of course, the middle of that is level with the top of the brow. So it's about there, so about there. And it's slightly more than half, isn't it, the bindi and the nose? So bring that across a little bit further. And then I've got the side of my head. So I'm just going to draw in a little bit. In the picture, I can see the hairline. On the image, on the iPad, for whatever reason, it's not showing me the very top and the very bottom of the picture, which is kind of annoying, but anyway. And so that edge of the hairline kind of comes down about like that. And then it's got all that, you know, that hair, those hair shapes going that way, which we'll fix up later. But if you want to mark them in lightly now, just to give yourself a bit of information. Sometimes it's good to give yourself information about where things sit. So you'll see the grid marks only on the black and white picture, just so that, you know, the other one was clear and you can see it better. So what I'm doing is marking the ear in, and it's a triangular shape, about like that. And then we've got the side of the face coming down through here. Again, I'm just going to press lightly, because if I have to take any of this off, I want my black background to stay nice and black. And if you're going to fill yours in later on with black or something dark, then it's not as vital, because you can cover it up pretty easily. We've just got the side of the ear coming down through the face there. And then we've got this lovely eye. So the eye comes across under the brow, and it arcs down a little, and then it kind of comes in at the end. So we've got that little tear duct dip down in towards the nose. So it kind of has a little S bend almost. Very subtle though. And so that's the top lid. And then if we pop the bottom lid in, so leave a gap where it'll be black. And of course we can blacken that off more later on. And then we've got the bottom lid there. And it's got a nice light shine across it, across there. And then we've got shadow under that, so we can sort that afterwards. So I've just got to get that main eye shape in there. And then we've done the nose, we've got to do the mouth. So remember, the center of the nose is about here. So the center of the mouth has to be in about the same place. So if that's the middle of the mouth, then we've got this top lip. So treat the lips as two separate pieces, and it's slightly wider than the nose. So we've got this dip in the lip. It goes up into the second side, which we can't see all of. And then we've got this top piece, and it basically comes sort of straight across the bottom. And when we put the shading and colours in there, we'll fade that off a little bit. And then the bottom lip comes down, and it's quite deep, isn't it, in height? I think it's actually taller or wider than the top one. Comes down about there, maybe even further actually. I'm just looking at my picture, how far from the bottom of my page. So the lip, yeah, should be lower. Maybe the nose should be lower too. No, about right. Sorry, talking to myself here. Interesting, isn't it? Okay, so I'm going to just make that mouth a little bit lower. Bring it down to here, I think. Yeah, and then the bottom bit comes down below there. That's better. So always checking, measuring, checking, looking at the distance between things. It's important, especially for things like this, which have, you know, structure. Faces, anything with bones, bodies, animals, all those things, they all have structure. And it's important to make sure you get all your bits and pieces in the right place. I mean, this is exaggerated because it's man-made, so we can get away with a little bit of variation. Okay, so that's about it, I think. Need to make the eye slightly lower, perhaps. Anyway, we can work on that. So we've got all the main things in place now, and that's all we need to start. So today's class is going to be about using colour without getting our fingers into there and blending it. I know I do teach people to blend because I love to blend, and I love what pastels do, and I love how they just all blend so beautifully, and you can create the most amazing colours and things. But today's exercise, we're going to try and leave some of the paper showing through, or the colour behind, and not push it through with our fingers as much. Has someone got a question? No? Okay. Just hear someone in the background. Okay. If you do want to say anything, please do. Don't hesitate. That's what we're here for. Okay, so let's get started with this. First, we need to look at some colours. So I've picked out some colours earlier, and these are just based on what I can see in the image, pretty much. So what I can see in here, when I look at this, and when I look at the digital one, I can see a lot of green, this kind of moldy khaki kind of green. So I can see a lot of that through there. So I've picked that one up, and I can see a lot of orange, of course, lovely terracotta kind of orange colour. There's lots and lots of that in there. The other colour I like is this golden yellow. Now you might not have all the same colours as this, but see what you've got that will be close. So a yellow is nice for some of the shine. And the other one I've got is an apricot colour. Now, if you don't have anything like that, then we'll have to go with white or light yellow. But that's nice too for the highlights. I can see that's like a coppery tinge I can see through there. So that is going to be my lightest colour at this stage. I reserve the right to change my mind. And you know I often do. But for now, I'm going to use that as my bright or my light, knowing I can go lighter later if I want to. And then I can also see some purple. I don't know if you can see purple or not. I can see it in the shadows around the chin and the side of the face and, you know, the nose. So to put a bit of purple on there, it just warms it up too. So that'll give it a lovely warmth for some shadow and, again, texture. I've put all these in order from dark to light. And the other one, of course, is blue violet. So if you've been coming to class for a while, you'll know that blue violet is my favorite dark. And it's a violet-based dark. So it looks black, but it's not. And that is gorgeous in the shadows. I may need black also, just to touch up my black paper if I end up getting anything on the paper, or if I want to, you know, blacken off the eye or something like that in the picture. But that's basically the colour palette that I've decided to use for this one. And you can always use charcoal as well if you want to, you know, use that, you know, for finer lines or something like that. Charcoal's very, very good with pastels, so don't stress. If you don't have pencils and you want to get in somewhere, for instance, in the eye, then your charcoal might be the answer to that. I've also got some pencils. These are my standbys. I've just got them here next to me all the time. So there's a black and there's a yellow and a white. And of course I can use those if I need to. I've got a whole set somewhere. I'm going to find them. But I'm not going to worry about pencils too much today because there's not a lot of fine detail in this. And it's really more of an exercise of getting some colour on the paper and kind of playing around with the textures. So I'm going to the time, 1:50. We might get started and we might go for another 5 or 10 minutes and then we'll have a short break if that's okay. And during the short break, you can, you know, that'll give you a chance to either catch up or move on ahead or have a break yourself. So let's get started. Let's start blocking in with some lights. So I'm going to put my palette next to me over there, just within reach. I like to keep it on a paper towel and keep it separate from all my other pastels. That way I know which colours I'm using and it's not confusing. And if I'm working on something and I don't get it finished today and I've still got my palette sitting here in its own little container, then when I come back next week, I don't have to figure out what colours I used. And, you know, if you do have to pack your artwork away and you don't have the luxury of being able to leave it out, then this is a really good option, just so you know what you've got and what you've been using. Okay, so let's get started. First, I'm going to mark in some of the light areas. This is kind of the opposite to what we normally do. But because we're on dark paper, I want to start blocking in a little bit of the light areas. So I'm going to use, no, I'm not. I'm going to use my yellow, not my lightest, but my golden yellow colour. And I'm going to start to just put that where I can see light. So, and I'm just using it on its side. So I'm trying to stay nice and loose. It's a short piece and I've got it lying down on the paper. So I'm just pulling that around the nose. So the top of the nose I can see is quite light. It's got, you know, reflection on it. And you literally just have to pull it around once. This is a very soft pastel too. So it's feels like a schminky. It's very creamy. Again, there's light on the top of the ear. So just noticing all the light bits. And if you can't find them on the colour version, have a look at your black and white one and squint at it if you can through your eyelashes. And that way you'll see the very lightest section. And there's not that many, to be honest. It's all very mid-tone because it's like a copper or something like that. But getting some light down first just helps us to map out where we're going to go with this. So there's a little bit of light on the cheek. And I'm just wiping my pastel across here lightly. So this is the gesture we're going to be doing today. It's just wiping it lightly across like that. And see how already it's starting to pick up the texture of the paper. So we're already creating that lovely texture of the Buddha. and it's starting to feel, you know, stony or like copper. Okay, and then of course I'm going to put a line on the eye where I can see that little bit of light on the bottom and the top lid. And don't worry if you muck it up. You can come back in and darken that later with more black or blue violet or something. So I'm just going to squint at that. So if you want to have a look at your art, it's always good to step back from it. So step away and look at it from a distance, or look away and then look back. And it always helps to give you a perspective and to see, you know, how you're going and where things sit. So if I squint at that, I can see that I've found all the little highlights. We're going to go over this with other pastels, so we'll probably lose a lot of it, but that's okay. We know where they are and we can pop them back in. So there'll be a lot of to and fro today. So we'll pick up one colour, put it down, then we'll grab another one and put that down, and then we'll go back to the other one. So lots of dancing between colours. Okay. So now I want to get into the mid-tones, and they're the orange and the green and the purple. So I'm going to start with the orange. This is a chunky stick of pastel. Can't remember what brand that one is. I like the square one. Might even be an Art Spectrum extra soft square. So they're nice because they've got a lovely sharp edge there. So if I want to get a sharp line, I can. And they've also got the lovely wide sides. So we can actually get quite a lot of pastel down just by wiping it over your page. And I'm literally going to put this pretty much everywhere on here. So just run over everything and wipe it across your page. So, and just hold it lightly, so don't press too hard. What we want to do is build up the layers slowly. So if you press lightly, you'll only put a little bit down, and then you'll have room to add more over the top. If you press hard, you'll end up putting a lot of pastel down, and you can layer a few layers, but you'll get less on because it'll get too full too quickly. So we just want to go lightly with this. So literally just wiping it all over the Buddha face, because we can come back and lighten up the lights and darken the darks afterwards. So we've got to get some base down to play with first, if that makes sense. So we need to get something down that we can actually start to work with. Okay. Now, while we're there, let's just notice where it's most orange and kind of press a little bit harder in those spots. So can you see up the top there, there's a couple of little orange brighter bits that maybe, you know, poking out more or more texture or something. So I'm literally just pressing a little bit harder and dabbing around with this orange pastel where I can see more orange parts. So the tip of the nose, I know that is light, but it's also oranger than, say, the bridge of the nose. So pop a bit more of the orange on there. Don't stress if you lose your lines or can't find things again. We'll find them again, put them back in. I know it all seems a little weird to be doing it this way. What we're aiming at is to get the pastels to blend with each other over the paper and create that lovely texture. So no fingers today. Going to keep our fingers out of it, which I find incredibly difficult, I have to admit. Okay, so now we've got a bit of orange on there. I'm going to pick up my green. This is the mossy green. It's a mid-tone as well. And I'm just going to wipe that around. So I'm just looking at the picture and noticing where all those little green bits are. So I can see some green up here on the eyelid. And as I'm putting this down, I'm thinking, oh, maybe I need to go a little bit light or darker, sorry, on the green. But anyway, I'm going to stick with this for now because I know I can add more over the top. Down the bridge side of the nose, we've got a bit of green there. There's shadow in there too, but we'll pop that in after. above the lip, between the nose and the lip, very green. I'm just going to wipe a bit of that around there too. So what I'm doing is just literally wiping this over the top of what I've already put down. And what's happening is it's adding colour, but it's also picking up the colour underneath and kind of blending them together. So we're starting to get this really nice combination of the two colours, but keeping the texture. So we're not letting this get smooth like it would if we put our fingers into it. Kind of keeping it nice and loose today. I can't tell you how hard I'm finding it, seriously. But it's a great exercise if you can restrain. So we've got this lovely green. It's kind of everywhere now that you start to look, isn't it? Yum. Almost looks like mold or some sort of growth. Okay. So it's not looking like anything much yet, but once we start to get some more colour on there, it'll really start to come alive. Promise. Trust me. It'll be okay. All right. So it's 2 o'clock and I'm going to take a 10-minute break, if that's okay. I'll come back at 2:10. That way you've got an opportunity to catch up or have a break or do whatever you need to do. And I'm going to pause the recording. Please remind me to pop it back on. So let's move on to the second part of our class. And as you know, so far we've just done the mid-tones and a little bit of light tone. Next, I want to start playing around with a little bit of the darks. So noticing again where the darks are on the image, and I can see there's quite a lot of dark down inside the face between the ear and the mouth, and then down at, but mostly on the right-hand side of the face, there's a fair bit of dark in there. And rather than using a very dark, I'm going to go with the purple first. So even though the purple is a dark colour, it's not the darkest we can go. So that means that if we need to get any darker, we can. So if I just rub this lightly over the darker areas and see how, because it's already got pigment underneath it or pastel, it's picking up the colours and it actually comes out onto the stick. So if you were picking your pastel up off your paper and then putting it back down again, you'd be also putting down the colour that it's picked up. So in this instance, that's not something we want to really do. And you would either have to wipe it clean, so then you could, use your little towel next to you and give it a wipe and you come up with beautiful clean pastel, and then put it down again and get another clean swipe. Or, which is what I'm doing, just keep it on the paper basically and don't lift it up. That way you get a beautiful continuous kind of blend and nothing kind of gets too dirty, and you get to mix all those colors together and create a really beautiful combination. And it doesn't matter if you put too much of the purple in one spot, which I am doing, but we can come back over that and put more light on afterwards. So what we want to do is start to layer the colors over each other. And I really love what yellow and purple do together. They just sing. They're so beautiful. So let's just focus on the shadow areas at the moment. And so there's a lovely shadow under the eyelid there. Now I know it's not dark enough, but we will definitely darken it up, but we're just building a base. So stay with me here, we'll sort it out. Yeah, so lovely shadow under the eye, and just bring that down a little bit lower than the actual shadow. So down onto the cheek a little bit, and see how we're kind of mushing this purple in with the green and the orange, and it's starting to create some really beautiful tones. So I kind of want to put it everywhere, but I'm restraining. Difficult. Okay, so back up around the top of the hair now. So let's go into the top of the hair, or the forehead, forehead, however you say that, before the hair begins. And I'm just going to pull a little bit of the purple up, pulling it around in the shape of the hair. So it's quite vibrant because I don't have another colour under that yet. Or I won't now because I'll put this down first. But against the black paper, it's quite bright, isn't it? But I don't mind that. I think it's quite nice. And we'll pop some oranges and yellows in there and darks, and we'll build up the tones. So again, this is just the undercoat, I guess. So because it's dark up there in the top of the brow, I just want to make sure I get my purple in there. It's dark up inside the ear, but see how the edge of the ear kind of bleeds off into the background. So if you've got a dark background already, just let that sort of disappear off into the edge there. And you could, you know, pull your finger up just once to get that a little bit of a hint of colour up through there. If you don't have a dark background, then you can use whatever colour you're going to put onto the background, push that in through here and kind of merge them together. So you end up with what they call a, what do they call it? Vanishing edge, the disappearing edge, something like that. And so that's a nice little technique to use as well if you want your painting to kind of disappear off into the distance. So you can use disappearing edges, and that means it just merges in with the background colour and they all become one. So as I'm working my way around this guy, I'm just looking for the shadows in the dark areas. And I can see there's shadow underneath the bottom lip. It's quite a dark shadow, so we will darken that up afterwards. But I just want to get some of this down first to start building up the variation of the shadows. And look at that little shape above the top lip, you know, that bit of skin that comes down between the nose and the lips. It's got a little bump in it. I'm just going to highlight that for you so you know what I'm talking about, this bit here. So that's you know, a definite shape. I'm going to soften it off a little bit because I don't want it to be really bright, but that's giving us a nice little curve. And then we've got some shadow under the nose here. And inside the nostril, it's dark in there, so I'll pop a bit of this purple in there too. And around under the nose, and then of course all the way across under that brow, that beautiful big arcing brow. Just do this lovely big purple line. I literally just dragged that down, layered on its side, and I pulled it down like that. So I've got a nice even line all the way down through there on the side of the nose. There's a bit of shadow just over here on the eyelid, and then there's a bit of shadow. See, there's a darker or deeper shadow above the nostril. It kind of comes out in this triangular shape. We'll definitely put more dark in there and make that more defined, but that's essentially where the shadows sit within his face. And of course we've got the black eye, or the dark in the eye there, and we'll darken that up. We might have to use black, I think. See how we go. So that's all the purples, and I've popped those where I can see dark, and I've just built a base. So what we're trying to do is just create a really nice foundation to build on. And some of the shapes have got a little bit lost or, you know, disappeared, but we can bring them back in with colour. So don't worry too much about that. Okay. So I've put my purple back into my palette, and what I want to do now is pick up my blue violet. So that's my darkest one. This is the one we're going to use to get all those really nice darks into our painting. And we're kind of going to, again, just roll it around or stumble, I think they call it, stumble, something like that. So you just stumble it across your paper. And again, that picks up colour from underneath, but it also lays down dark or more of this. So that's what we want. We want to build up the shadows. So this is my darkest. And see, just by doing that, it's created this beautiful deep shadow on the right hand side there between the ear and the face. So that's what we're looking at now. So where we've put purple already, where it was dark, we're going to put this down on the darkest. areas. Okay, and where it's really dark, you can press a bit harder, so that will leave more pigment on the page. And then as it kind of fades off into not so dark, you can just lift it up and make it lighter, so that then it kind of merges into those purple colours. How beautiful. So again, up in the top of the ear, it's quite dark up in there. So I'm just going to pull a bit of this through there, and it sort of disappears off into the black background on the edge there. You can see the edge, but it's sort of, you know, as nearly as dark as the black. So I want to bring that down and darken off inside my ear. And up the top on the hairline, so you can see it's really quite dark right around the edge there, isn't it? So I'm just going to push that fairly firmly around there. My blue violet is quite soft, so I don't need to press very hard to get a lot of it down, depending on your brand. So if you've got something like a Rembrandt, you might find it's a little bit firmer or harder, so you'll have to push a bit harder to get the colour to stick. While I'm here, I'm going to put some of those little lines in for the hair. So what I've done is use the end of my pastel, tip it up, so I'm just using the tip of it or the edge, and just put some little marks in there to try and get the shadows of the hair through there. So just a few little lines, and just draw them in the direction that the hair is growing. I know it's not real hair, but the way that the design goes. So those little arc marks that kind of come out from the dark part of the forehead and then into the hairline. And we'll highlight some of those lighter bits in a minute after this bit. So this is how we're slowly building up the tones and getting him to take on a little bit more texture. There's a dark shadow around the bindi, the round thingy on the forehead. That's called a bindi. So if you put a little bit of dark just on the bottom side and a little bit on the top, I'll put it all around, so I'm going to have to fix that. But yeah, this is just about touching this down where you see dark. And again, I can see dark, you know, under the brow. We've got this beautiful big shadow coming under the brow. And as it comes down the side of the nose, where they're around about where the eye and the nose kind of meet, there's less shadow there. So just lift it up and lighten it off a little bit. And then as you come down, remember that triangular shape I spoke about on the side of the nose? It's a triangle of dark. I don't know if you can see it clearly, but if you look closer, you can see it's much darker in here. Just that little shape there. So we've still got dark where the purple is, but this section is darker again. And so that's casting a darker shadow. So we need to put more tone on there, which is what I've just done. You see how it's starting to pick up where the light's coming from now. We're going to add way more, so don't stress if it's not looking right yet. And while I've got this dark in my hand, I'm going to go inside the nostril and darken that off. And then also underneath it, so there's like a little curl in the nostril there. So it's dark up inside it, and then you've got a little curl coming around underneath. And there's a little bit of light there. So just leave that undarkened if you can. If not, we can put more light in later. And then we've got shadow under the nose as well. So just darken off in there. And again, looking around the top of the lip, a little bit of dark just on the side of it there. Then up between the lips, it's quite dark. So there's a dark area there. And again, I'm just letting the pastel do the work. I'm not putting my fingers into this, and just letting that kind of blend with everything on its own, because they work nicely like that. So now we're starting to get some shadow and texture going on. The other spot where we need to put this dark is under the eye, so under that bottom eyelid. Remember, we've got shadow there. That's important because it tells everything, every little shadow mark tells us what the texture is doing. It tells us if it's bumpy or smooth or lumpy and where the light's coming from. I've just put some of the dark into the slit of the eye as well. It's not quite as black as my black paper, but I can darken that up with black again later if I want to. And then again, just wafting this around to get a little bit of that texture. And again, as I'm wiping it over my paper, just sort of staying on in some parts and not others. Kind of nice. And you can still see the colour underneath it. So that's roughly the darks in place now. And we can come back and add more. You can always add more. So don't stress if you feel like you haven't got enough or you mucked it up or went over it with something light. You can always put more dark on or more light, whatever works. Okay, so what I'm trying to do is just keep our touch nice and light so that we can retain the texture of this. At the end of this, you know, we might not be able to see very much of the black paper behind it, but that's cool, doesn't matter. It's absolutely fine. So what I'm going to do now is just keep dancing between my orange and my green and my purple. What I want to do is just build up all the colour. And if you really study the picture and look for where those colours are, just kind of wipe them on where you see, for instance, the orange. I'm just wiping it around there. And over some of my purples. So the orange and the purple make the most beautiful browny, bronzy sorts of colours. And that's what we're trying to create here. It's this beautiful bronze colour. So literally just wiping it over. See how it's picking up all the other colours and starting to create its own sort of blend. It's really interesting how this happens. By leaving the pastel on the paper and not picking it up, then I'm kind of keeping it, you know, neutral and letting it blend naturally. If you keep picking it up, putting it down, you're going to keep just making it kind of blotchy. So to get that lovely continuous blend, just want to keep wiping it over and just travel around the page gently. So literally just pulling it around. It's kind of, I'm putting it sort of everywhere really, because I just want this to start blending with all the other colours. And then we'll pop some greener on the top again, and we'll just keep going with the layers. I'm going to refine this lip a little bit more because it needs to be slightly wider than what I had it. And you know, you can come back and, you know, tidy things up and sharpen up your lines and things if you need to. So I'm going to leave inside around the inside of the nose, you know, on the face area, between the face and the nose. Where it's not dark, there's a bit more green in there. So I'm going to kind of put more green in there when I get to the green. So you can actually use the pastel like you would your finger to kind of blend, but not. And it just, yeah, it's just so beautiful. And different papers have different textures. So this is the Colour Fix paper. It feels like sandpaper and it's got a kind of a gritty texture. The harder I press, the more colour is going to stick to my paper. And so therefore, you won't see the black paper underneath it. And so you can really vary the way that you play with pastels. You can really, you know, have a bit of a play with what you do with them and how much you put down, how hard you press and the way that you blend. So, you know, depending on what you're doing, you might want some really hard, sharp marks. So you can use the edge, press hard and get nice, big, strong lines. If you want soft marks and soft lines, then you can just, you know, press really lightly and be gentle with it. So lots of different options, really. It's quite lovely to have so many different ways you can use the pastel. I can make a pastel look like an oil, you know, with the way I blend and mix my colours, and it's quite incredible. I haven't mastered how to make them look like watercolour yet, but haven't tried either. But I'm sure it's probably possible. They're so versatile. They really are lovely. And by mixing them like this on your paper, it's just creating the most beautiful colours. Like purples and yellows and oranges are divine together. I'm just touching the eye up with some of my orange because I wanted to soften that off a little bit. Now I've lost the dark in there, but I know I can put it back in. And so I might pick up the green next and start to put a bit of that down. So see how we're just kind of layering and layering, and as you go, you're filling up more of the tooth of the paper, and it's just creating this really beautiful texture. So there's a fair bit of green in the cheek and around under the eye there. There's quite a lot on the eyelid. And if you look closely, you can see that there's a shine on the eyelid too, which will pop in a minute with the yellow colour. And that was the yellow we used right at the beginning to get the highlights in. So can you see now, by building up the layers and adding colours after colour after colour, it just really helps to build it all up and create the depth that we're after. That you can just keep going and going until the paper won't take any more. It does get to that point where that you just can't get any more on. And when it does get to that point, and if you do want to keep adding, you can always use a fixative. So you can get spray fixatives to use with pastels. And what they'll do is kind of set what's on the paper. And then you can actually add more over the top, and everything underneath won't get blended in with the next layer. So it's quite a nice option if you want to, you know, build up your layers and maybe build your first layer and then let that sit underneath and then put something else on the top and not have them interfering with each other. So fixatives are wonderful for that. I do find they darken the colour quite a lot though, so I tend not to use fixative on my final layer of my finished artwork because it does actually darken it off and dull the brightness. If you're into bright colours like me, I just love my brights. And so I really want my, you know, my lights to shine. And unfortunately, the fixative tends to just kind of dull it all down. So that's one disadvantage of it. But it is wonderful for in between layers. It's also great on charcoal too. So if you've got charcoal drawings, you can fix those, no problem. And that'll stop them from being smudged or dropping dust and that kind of thing. All right, so I'm just re-looking at this now. So every now and again, you just need to stop, put everything down, and step back, have a look, reassess, make sure, you know, you've got the right shape and everything's still going along nicely, because when you do get involved in mixing your colours around, it's easy to kind of lose your way a little bit and forget where you were. But so now's the time to sort of stand back and refine it a little bit and look at your shadows and your lines. If you need to sharpen anything up, you can. I'm noticing my top lip needs a bit of work, so it's not straight enough across the bottom here. So I need to add a bit more orange across here, and then I might put a bit more dark down on the bottom lip so that it doesn't look quite so big. So check your shapes. Keep referring back to your reference photo. That's where all the information is in that photo. Keep checking back at it. In fact, you probably should be looking at your photo or the thing you're painting more than you're actually painting, because you need to study the item and really get familiar with it. So what I'm doing now with the orange is I'm just running around it and highlighting some of the orange sections I can see that need to be a little bit more defined. For instance, the eyelid. Now I know that's got a shine on the edge, but I still want to get a bit more of my orange in there just to bring that forward a little bit. So, you know, the sharper your colours are, or the brighter, then the closer they are to us. So to bring that eyelid out and give it that feeling of 3D, I want to just play around a little bit with the tone in there, and then I'll have to put some more shadow back in. I think I'm going to have to get some black just for some drama, create a bit more interest. And up in the hair, so before I popped some of the dark in there and some of the purple, and I want to get my orange in there just to get the strands of hair going on. So I don't want to do really hard, sharp marks though, because I think that will deter from the whole thing. So what I'm doing is using the edge of my orange, but just pressing lightly and doing these soft, feathery kind of movements to get that hair kind of shape through there. And if I do it every so often, then on the other side of it, it'll look like it's got a shadow. So it'll start to look solid. So just wispy little marks. Try not to press too hard, because if you do that, it'll be too strong. And this is just, you know, incidental things that you probably don't notice until you start to study the thing, until your eye starts to wander around it. It's not something that jumps out at you straight away. The eye and the nose are the main features. Okay, so I'm just dancing around this with my orange and checking back at my reference photo all the time. And if I can see where it needs to be a little bit, this is my mid kind of colour. So I want to put some mids down, and then I can add light where it might need a bit more light. And I will. There'll be more light to add on the eyelid and the cheek and on the nose. But I just want to get some orange down first, because that's a nice mid colour. So it's all starting to come together nicely. And of course, if you need to add some more dark, you can do that. So I know I've lost some of my shadows because I've gone over them, you know, with other colours. So I can come back in and add some more dark. Just orange up that nostril a little bit. So the top of the nostril section kind of merges off into the shadow of the nose, doesn't it? It's not a definite edge there, but it is a definite edge around the black nostril section. And then we've got that little curl. That little curl I talked about. I'll put the light in the wrong spot then. Inside. Gee, it's hard to get your dark or any pastel onto a definite line sometimes. There we go, that worked. And so now I've picked up my dark again, and I'm just going to touch that back over some of the dark bits. So I just want to make sure I have enough contrast too. You know, you don't want everything to be mid-tone. It gets very boring. So we need to create some drama and make sure you've got plenty of dark so that the light pops against the dark. Just going back up into the forehead here on the right, because that's really dark up there. And you're going to have to get black, I think, just because I want to darken off the really black bits. So again, just checking in the shadow of the eye, in the slit of the eye, which is a little bit harder now because we've got to get a finer line in there. And then down on the nose, and that little triangular shape in there. And we've got shadow around the top of the lip a little bit there. And in the little dip of the top of the lip, there's a little bit there too. Under the nose, and then under the bottom lip. So we're literally just repeating everything, going over it and darkening it off, and making sure that we've got all the right things in the right place. So that's coming together quite well. I am going to go and pick up a black though. I always try and resist black, and then I get to the end and think, oh no, we need to pop it in. It's so strong and it's so dramatic, and I think it'll be nice to have some black, especially with the paper colour. So I've got a bit of black here. I'm just going to push that through into the really dark areas. So see how, because we've used 3 colours to put our darks on, and we've got this beautiful range from the purple to the blue violet to the black, now we can really get some cool drama going on in here, because this is the blackest we can get. And it's nice sometimes to save the really darks until the end when you're sure that you want to use them. And same with your lights, you know, always save my light for last. So that's why I say, you know, try not to use white at the beginning, because you can't go whiter than white. And so if you use something else like a pale blue or yellow or pink or whatever it is, you've still got room. You still give yourself room to go lighter with white. So I would say save my light for last so that you give yourself a bit of space. But I'm loving what the black's doing here. So it's really nice to get a bit of drama in. And of course, you don't have to put it everywhere where there's shadow, just in the really dark bits. And that makes it much more interesting, doesn't it? Because we've got a lovely range of darks and darks to mid, and it just makes it so much more interesting. I'm going to go into the lips here, so they need to be a bit darker in between the lips. And then soften that off as you come out into each lip. A nice gradual blend from dark to the lip colour. And we've got a shadow under the bottom lip too. Just by popping the black in there, it's really given it some drama. It's good. I've also got an awful lot of dust, so I'm just going to tip that off. By tipping it off to the left, it's not interfering with my paper, that it hasn't got colour on it. So if I tipped it the other way, it would catch on the paper here, and then I'd have to get it all off. So yeah, it's good to think about that stuff. And while I'm thinking about that stuff, I'm just going to remove this grid line off my black page, off my black background. And then in the process of doing that, I picked up colour onto the eraser. So now I've got to get that off. And on it goes. So that's starting to look pretty good. Now we get the fun bit. Now we get to put the glow in there. And like I said, save the light for last, and we get to make a glow. Oh, that's the best bit. So what I'm going to use is the yellow first, and I've saved my apricot colour. So that's my lightest. I don't know if that might be a little bit too light, but anyway, we'll see. Let's find out. So first I'm going to put some of this yellow back in. Remember, we popped that in at the beginning, and now I'm going to pop a bit more in because I want to try and get some of that lovely golden shine happening where I can see that, especially here on the nose. So again, I'm just literally holding the pastel down on the paper and just very gently, very lightly pushing that around. I just popped a little bit of shine inside that nostril, but it's a bit bright. And then I dabbed it with my finger and smudged everything. So let's get back in there now with some shadows. So this is what happens, you see. Pastels are so forgiving, but they're also so fragile. And so every little touch impacts something, some other section or part. So you've got to be very, towards the end anyway, when you're working on detail, you want to be very careful about, you know, where you put different things. And that's when pencils come in handy, because you've got a much more control over a pencil. Anyway, that nostril needs to be darker now. So I've just got stuck in this bit, and that's what happens. You get caught up in the little details. There we go. Better. Okay, back to my yellow. So I just want to put a bit of shine on the bindi here, because that's got to be catching the light. And you don't want to fill the whole thing in with yellow. You just want to kind of touch it on the paper and let the paper pick it up. And so down here, this section here is catching some light. So what I'm doing is just pulling it around, but pressing a bit harder so that it kind of sticks to the paper better. So just on the edge there. And of course on the top of the ear. So I'm just going to touch that up again a little bit because that's a nice highlight spot. I think I've gone a bit too dark with my eraser on the very top of the ear. So that doesn't need to be as bright as I've made it. So what I'm trying to do now is get some off with my eraser. And I'm not doing a very good job. So when that happens, if you've got a pastel the same color as your paper, which happens to be black, so that's good, I can just touch that up now with my black and soften off that bright edge a little bit. So it should kind of just merge off into the paper. It's a little bit blacker than the paper, but never mind. So that's the ear there. And then we've got a little bit of shine. I'm just going to put this on the paper, this yellow, and just pull it down carefully and just not press too hard. What I want to do is try to make a really natural, organic, broken line. So nothing too strong. Then the other spot where there's light is on the edge of the eye. So I don't know if you've got a pencil, you might be happier to use a pencil. I made myself nervous saying that. So I'm going to try a pencil on the edge of the eye. This is a yellow, light yellow. Pencils sometimes don't sort of stick as well as the pastel, depending on what brand you're using. Did that work? Yeah, it's a little bit kind of washed out though. It's not as golden as I would like it. I'm going to have a go at going over it with the edge of my pastel now. It's just about trying different things and to see what works. So I'm going to find an edge on this little bit of pastel, try and find a corner, and I'm just going to run that across the top of the lid like that. It's a little bit bright, so I'm going to dab it in a minute and soften it off because I don't want it to be that sharp. And that's the nice thing, you know, you can keep kind of working with the layers and softening things off. Before I get my fingers in there, I'm just going to pop a bit of shine just here on the eyelid. See there? So you've got to kind of, if you can't see it very strongly in your reference photo, you've got to kind of imagine where the light would be bouncing off this. And so I can see there's a bit of light on the cheek there. I'm just using my yellow and literally just wiping it very lightly across like that. Because what I want it to do is look like it's catching the light. It's kind of shiny. And if you get it wrong, just go over it with a bit of green or purple or something to quieten it down again. Put a bit more on the nose. And then on the edge of the lips, so there's a little shine on the top of the lip there. And another little shine on the bottom lip, just on the edge. And don't do continuous hard lines, just keep them like soft little wispy broken lines. It looks much more natural, especially on something like this that's got texture. So now that's starting to have a bit of a shine. I feel like on the eyelid here I went too high, so I'm just going to quieten that down with a bit of green. See how you can just go over things and soften them off a little bit. So all about figuring out what each colour is going to do for you. And see, we can keep building this up until the cows come home and layering it. I'm going to soften that line off with this green, see if that works a bit better. I felt it was too bright, a little bit too shiny. Just want to have a slight shine, nothing too strong. Now, I'm going to get my fingers into there. I'm going to dab with my fingers, not blend. So dabbing means I'm just pushing the pigment into the paper and kind of blurring it a little bit, but not blending it. So I'm just going to dab this in because I just want to soften the edges off a little bit. But I don't want to blend, because if I do that, it's just going to turn to mud and I'm going to lose all the vibrancy of those colours. You see how just by dabbing I've kind of blurred the lines a little bit, so softened them off. Okay, and now I've done that, I feel like I need to darken up inside the eye here. I've just picked up a black pencil. If I darken that off, then that will match the darkness that we've put in other spots with black. It could be a bit deeper, that dark area. Again, check your reference photo. Just keep checking back at that all the time. Okay, and then I'm going to go a little bit darker under the eye here. Feel like I need a bit more dark in there with my black, just very softly. Softly, softly. That's given that a bit more shadow, so now it looks like it's popping out a bit more. Okay, so I think that's just about done, almost done. You know, you could keep adding colours. I could put more orange on, I could put more green on, and keep going. I don't know whether I want to put this on or not. This is a very light one that I saved for last. Let's see. Let's see if we need a bit more shine or not. Ooh, it's quite nice, isn't it? If I just let it kind of mix in with whatever's underneath it. So this is my pale apricot colour. Don't mind that. Just in a couple of spots though, not everywhere. So just imagine, where's the light going to hit this? What is sticking out the most to catch the light, basically? If I put a little bit on the bottom lip there. Oh, it's nice, isn't it? Just a few little touches here and there. Just checking back at my picture all the time. I don't think I'm going to put any more on there now. That'll be nice. Just a little bit on the brow and the nose. So I popped a little bit on the side of the nose, just wiped it once, and then a little bit on the ball of the nose, and just a touch here on the nostril, and then just on the top of the brow on the edge there, just a very light line. And then on this bottom lip on the right corner, just brighten that up a little bit, and that just gives it enough bright, really, I think. Do we need more on the eye? Maybe a touch. Just on the bottom lid there, a little bit. Oh, careful. Might have to smush that off a little, but that works quite well. Pencils are also great little blenders sometimes. I'm just looking up here, making sure I didn't go into my shadow bit. Did a little bit, so I'll get rid of that. And I think that might be it for today. A beautiful Buddha. I think my Buddha's got a much skinnier face than the other guy, but that's okay. Everyone's going to have their own style of Buddha. It's been fun doing faces and things today. Lots of fun. And now I'm going to start to fiddle. Stop it. All right, so I'm going to give you a couple minutes and then we'll do show and tell. Have a look at how everybody went. And if you are doing the video class, I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope that you're very happy with what you've created today. And if you'd like to send me a photo of your artwork, I would love that. It's always lovely to see what everybody's done, and that way I can pop it into my newsletter and Facebook and all those things, and you'll get your art up there and famous. So thanks for coming, and I look forward to seeing you again.